everybody, and welcome back to the Simply Human YouTube channel and podcast. Karen, welcome back from your birthday week.
Woohoo!
Did you have a good birthday?
Yeah, just a great time. Just learning how to enjoy each moment. And so it's nice. One of the things I love to do about having being born in July 2nd year is to be able to have the whole week. So I really got to celebrate for a whole week. So yeah, but I'm so excited about this topic because this is, as you know, a topic that's dear to my heart. In fact, I have an offering related to that. I'm just so excited to talk about triggers.
All right, folks. Today, as Karen just said, we're talking about triggers and getting triggered, and whether it's yourself or whether you've probably heard somebody, maybe they've said it to you, maybe you've just heard about it in general. I'm feeling triggered, or I need a trigger warning, which has become really popular over the last decade or so. But one of the reasons we wanted to bring this up is that I noticed that the trend over the last 10 to 20 years seems to be leaning towards this cultural norm of people saying, I'm triggered, you need to stop what you're doing. Or I don't want to get triggered, so you have to warn me before you say anything that might be triggering to me. And it is this change of locus of control from within oneself and learning how to be resilient and how to get out of being triggered into an expectation that the world around you changes. And that is just not an effective long-term. And according to the research, also not an effective short-term solution. So today we're just going to go briefly over an understanding about what exactly is happening when we're saying we're triggered, and then talk a little bit about how that happens in your personal life, but also in the work environment, and then what's more effective strategies to build long-term resilience. Karen, sounds like a good plan. You ready to leap into this?
Yes, but there's one thing I want to add to. It's very interesting for the listeners. You may not think you get triggered because when I'm such a pleaser, right? Or when seriously, right? Because when I'm such a pleaser, or I tend to not be aware of trigger. I never really was aware to trigger until I started to understand that maybe 5 years ago, I began to realize I was triggered. I never felt the body response. So that's why I'm so excited, because you may not think that you are triggered, but you actually, we're trying to tell you that I'm sure you do have a trigger that comes, because we all just naturally do that. And so that's what I'm excited for Christina to share where this comes from.
Right. So let's talk about, what are we talking about? First of all, we're going to talk about being triggered. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, what triggered is experiencing a strong emotional reaction of fear, shock, anger, or worry, especially when either you're made to remember something from the past that was unpleasant, or the experience you're dealing with in the moment spontaneously triggers a memory from something in the past. They believe that it is related to how we experience life and events, and how memories are stored. That memories are stored by taking in a lot of sensory details. So what we hear, what we smell, what we feel, and those memories can be incredibly cemented if you haven't had a chance to process it and integrate it in with your newer brain. So memory and then emotional reaction to painful events comes more from that lizard brain that we've talked about. You've got the amygdala, which is what's associated with your emotions. We've got the vagus nerve, which I'm going to go over real quickly again. And you have different parts of the brain where you're registering smell, sight, that helps you learn in some sense, so that in the future, you can predict, or if something's going to be dangerous, and do what you need to do to survive. But triggers really, that's a primitive brain, but triggers really come in all different forms in our modern day. We're going to talk real quickly about what some of those things are. In general, when we're talking about what is something that can cause that emotional response, remember, it's associated with a memory of an unpleasant experience or a painful experience. Something like holidays. That can be a trigger for somebody.
Yes. I was hearing about Thanksgiving, right?
Oh,
Thanksgiving.
right. If you have like a history where your family gets into arguments, you may find like dread might be coming up, like, oh, Thanksgiving's coming up, and you feel this dread because that's become associated with a negative response. So it could be sight, smell, taste. I remember when I was growing up, my family is Filipino, and there was one dish that my mom made that I didn't, I'm autistic. There's a lot of smells and textures that are just really hard for me. And there was this one dish that she would make that it was made in an old-fashioned pressure cooker. And an old-fashioned pressure cooker has this release valve, and it makes a certain sound like all I would have to do is hear that sound and I would start crying.
Yeah, I remember I couldn't swallow medicine until 11th grade. I think this is a trigger for me because anytime I taste anything that's like there was Johnson & Johnson like orange tablets because I had to like chew on them. So like orange floats don't work for me. I mean, even the word on it just triggers something in me because it just reminds me of that horrible taste. And so I can't even taste it. Like I won't even try it again. It's just very interesting. But that reminds me, I have to deal with that based on maybe after this episode, I'm going to have to try and be more curious about it so to get over that trigger.
Right. That's that sensory memory.
Yeah, I know. See, I forgot about that until we talked about that.
So when we talk about triggers, there's a range. So there are folks who say have PTSD. Maybe they were in the military. And I live in a town where we have a program called Wounded Warriors, and they come out in the summer, and it's actually, they're not even veterans, they're active duty, and they are coming straight from the hospital for some outdoor recreation rehab. And I have to do this training for the volunteers because in the summer we have thunderstorms, and the thunderstorms, because it sounds like a bomb going off, can be a trigger, because again, that sound now association. So you have this spectrum from, really like severe near death experiences and associations like that, all the way to your family Thanksgiving. It could be anything like that. It could be, for some people, being alone can trigger an experience of loss or grief. That's an unpleasant experience. Rejection can become a trigger where then you become avoidant of commitment because the pain of rejection is so hard. You don't want to put yourself in that situation. So anyone, even say you're in a dating situation, can trigger this anticipatory fear of rejection and anxiety, even panic. So breakups, things like that. Violent news. A lot of people these days, it's called doom scrolling, where they're actually subjecting themselves to getting, triggered by just news, because that can give a sense of helplessness because you can't do anything about what's going on in the world on that individual basis. Maybe you've been in a car accident. I was in 2 accidents sort of back to back. Someone T-boned me, and then 2 months later, I skidded out on black ice on a mountain pass. Nice. And it was this super slow motion as my vehicle was sliding towards the guardrail, and it was just huge drop off, and I had this, just seemed like forever to contemplate, wow, I could die in a minute.
Oh, wow.
And every time I drove over that pass,
you get that trigger.
Yeah, that was a trigger. And the sound when the vehicle hit the guardrail, and it obviously held, but that bang sound became a trigger. Or driving on the mountain pass or black ice now. Like all of those things are associated with this memory of this near-death experience. And then Karen has talked about in the past words being a trigger.
Yeah, so words like, for me, even the word feedback. Has always been a trigger for me. And people are going to say feedback, and I just have to translate into a different word. I had to choose the word observation. It was just their observation, their opinion, their observation. And that released me from that, like I had to do it or I did something wrong. We have all these words associated, words plus tone. My one Coach E had a word plus a tone thing that she had to realize. It was not just the words, it was the way they said it. It's the way that triggered. Yeah. And then she did some of the techniques that we're going to share with you because I shared it with her as a coach. It was really cool because now she goes in there with more curiosity after she triggers. It's really cool. It's not a big thing, but it's enough. We're challenging you also to think about things that might have triggered you and just know about it. And it's not to explore them all at once. It's just one at a time. Just see, oh, I was triggered. Interesting. Because you're going to find new ones all the time. I'm still finding words and I'm still finding events that I'm triggered with. I'm just so surprised. Seriously, I'm still
Yeah.
finding them. I find one, I find another one, but I have the resilience to go through it. And that's what we're trying to teach you, is the resilience to make through it.
Yeah, and we wanted to mention a few examples of how being triggered might show up that you may not be really as cognizant about, because some of the examples we gave, those are obvious. I was in a car crash, of course, driving over that same mountain pass. That seems obvious that that's going to be a trigger, and then I'm having a reaction. But there are more subtle ways that we can be triggered, and this particular in the work environment. And I was doing some coaching, and I had a senior executive that in our work together, we realized that she was actually getting triggered by her boss, so the vice president, who was really a lovely person, but she was the only female, and she had male peers, and then we had this VP, and it triggered this family dynamic where she started seeing the VP as the father who she never got approval from, and then she was in competition with the brothers who got the projection from her peers, and then she didn't have a voice. Like, she became so worried about making mistakes, and it triggered all of these dynamics for her. And once she became aware of it, she was able to pull that back, see him as just the VP who he was and the director that she was, and she was able to show up more authentically and much more confidence. And this happens a lot more.
A lot.
I had another colleague who we were just chatting, and over time she said, you know what? I think I'm acting like I do with my mom, with her boss. And she's like, I'm feeling criticized. And then I shut down, and then I rebel. So then she didn't want to do some of the assignments she was given. And when she realized she was getting triggered into that shame cycle that she experienced with her mom, she was able to, again, grab it back, see her boss as her boss, and get out of that dynamic. So, hey, Karen, I don't know. Do you have any
Well,
experiences?
I think it's always happening when you have any team, the dynamics of a team, like especially when you're the only female or there's not very many. That creates a dynamic with itself. And then you have to be acting like one of the boys. So there's all those triggers that you have. But I was just even thinking about just the team. The thing is, so much is you want to prove yourself. I always go back to grades. Like when I was triggered by A through F. You always get grades. Mm-hmm. That's why I always hated ranking when people did performance evaluation ranking. Why are you ranking people? Does it really, just group them, right? Does it really matter? I think no matter what, it's really important when you have the trigger of, when you look at your team dynamics, your relationship with one person, you need to ask, what is that triggering? Who is it behind it? Is there someone there behind that whole event that is reminding you of? And sometimes it could a parent, sometimes it's a teacher, sometimes it's also sometimes just the world, society, that my brain is triggered to think about that. So I remember that when this one client that went into a new position and wanted to prove herself because she's a new person, she felt as though when she put an idea out there that they weren't listening to her. But we realized when we moved the dynamic from not having to prove herself, it changed it. I think it's because their old dynamics of being triggered. I'm telling you guys, there's so much that we're triggered that we don't even know, because that's that ingrained behavior that we have. And that's why we're asking you to do that. Now,
so we should just hone people in. Think of being triggered or triggering events as something that causes a stress response. And it can be anywhere from mild stress, like worry and anxiety, to a panic attack. Now, in the workplace, maybe you're dealing more on the worry, stress, feeling a little bit performance anxiety, that type of stress response. If you have a stress response, you should be asking yourself, is there something that is triggering the stress response?
Yeah, and part of the stress response could be, like we said, in the body, right? I know people who say that their foot starts tapping because they're getting nervous. So their foot starts tapping, right? Or, you feel it in your shoulder, or you shrunk your shoulder. And you got to ask, when you feel that shrunkenness in shoulder, what is causing that? Because sometimes we don't even realize it, but we shrunk even more. And that to me is a trigger response.
That is such a great point that you're bringing up. Matter of fact, I'm going to put a link into the show notes on another YouTube channel that I really like. He's a body language analyst. I think the one I'm going to post, it's an interview with Elon Musk, where it was a bit of a triggering situation. And it's everything that Karen just talked about, like shoulders started to come forward, or you'll see something, you'll see your hands start maybe rubbing, or
is that why
your
you did this just a minute ago?
Yeah. That's just, it's exactly what Karen just said, that there's these really subtle body signs.
Yeah.
When you see these signs, it's about now being curious. Am I doing that because it's just an unconscious thing? But you'll see more of these soothing movements with the hand or rubbing the legs, or what Karen said about shoulders coming forward, because we're, again, protecting the vulnerable organs.
Exactly.
And you could be in a team meeting, and this would be kind of fun, is if it's like a little bit of a tough meeting, see if you can notice these
Who
responses.
else?
That's why I'm going to put the
and
link.
Other people too. Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's it. Okay, let's start moving into then, what do we do? We're starting to notice that we're in stress response, or what can we do for ourselves? Because telling other people, like, to not say words.
I did
or
that
stop.
with Mark. I told Mark, do not use the word always. It did not work. Because whenever Mark said the word always, do not use that with me. Do not use always. And it's hard for him not to use the word always.
Yeah.
You know, it's just his natural way of saying things. That did not work.
It doesn't work, does it?
But no, I had to switch it, right? I had to learn for myself that he's not, what's his intention? It's not to like say, you stink, you know, like, I can't believe you do this. You're terrible as a human being. That's not what he heard. But that's when I was going into shame as well. But
that's what was going on. That's the story in here.
Let's get
back. I'm going to go over real quickly things that are not helpful. What Karen just said, telling someone, you can't say this, you can't say that, don't do this, don't do that. That is just not helpful, because it's moving that locus of control from, or the center of control, or where the authority or power is, from yourself, and it's putting it in the hands of other people. Now I'm dependent upon you cooperating with my requests to change that behavior, or I'm going to continue to be triggered. As you can see, not only is it not effective, but it creates dependencies. It also, for the people around you, it's like being with someone and having eggshells, because now there's all these different words that you can't say, or all these different things you can't do in order for you to feel better. People on the receiving end feel like, oh my God, it's like walking on eggshells with this person. They're going to get mad no matter what I say. So not effective. If you're with someone who tends to be triggered, it's not helpful to tell them to just don't be triggered, move on, let it go, don't be such a snowflake. That's not helpful. This stuff is happening in the primitive brain, and it instantaneously happens. It's, people don't choose to be triggered. They just are triggered. So that's not helpful. And here's the interesting thing that I found in the research. Trigger warnings have not proven through the research to be effective. They either has no effect. So a trigger warning is, people say, I need a trigger warning. Tell me before you say something so I can choose to walk out of the room, or not listen, or not read this thing, or not watch this thing, whatever, or trigger warning. And there's been a number of studies done with pretty large groups of people. One of the ones I just saw was like 1,400 people. Another one almost 500 people. Some of them had diagnosable PTSDs. Some cohorts were college students. And what they found was that either trigger warnings had no change, no actual impact in people feeling less triggered, or it was actually made it a little bit worse. Because what happened is people feel more identified with being a victim when they're saying trigger warning, trigger warning, trigger warning, because what they're saying is, I can't handle this, I can't handle this, I can't handle this. And it reinforces an identity of being a victim. Even if you're not thinking that at an unconscious level, It's an over-identification with being a victim. And the other thing that they found was even when they want a trigger warning, so they have the choice to not look at the thing or not hear the thing, it actually didn't change that behavior. Because again, as human beings, it's almost when someone says, okay, you're not going to want to watch this. And then your curiosity kicks
Then you
in.
want
Well,
to watch
well,
it.
how?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know.
you wanna
I know.
watch it. So this is like if someone says, don't think about a pink elephant.
Then you
What's
think
the
I'll
first
leave a
thing that
pink,
happens?
a pink elephant.
A pink elephant comes into your head. So
It already comes in when you said pink elephant. It's already
right,
there.
right. Here's been this trigger warning, and yet there's just hasn't been research to support that there's benefit to it. So then what is helpful?
Oh, that's so interesting.
The first thing is what Karen had said is do a little reflection on what might be triggers that you aren't aware of and bringing some awareness to that. And then the second thing is being aware of those body sensations. Because as I said before, being triggered is about a stress response. So that vagal nerve that we talked about goes off and it does things like puts adrenaline into your system. So you will feel your heart racing, sweaty palms, muscle tension. Your stomach might get a little bit tense. You might find that you're not thinking as clearly. Like these are all the signs of going into fight flight. So that's the first most important thing. Know what your signs of fight flight looks like. And the very first thing to do is to calm your body down. And I'm going to have a link to an exercise called the pelvic floor relaxation. But basically, what it is that you need to unclench your body, relax your shoulders, soften your gaze, breathe, and relax your body so that your brain will switch out of fight flight into your normal state. It's the number one thing. The minute you notice stress response, you have to get control over your own physiology, your own body.
That's that sniper exercise, right? That the U.S.
Yes, the pelvic
defense.
floor relaxation. And it only takes 30 seconds to 45 seconds when you do this exercise of basically unclenching around your glutes. And if I have it real quick, let me see if I could pull the slide up. Yeah, here it is. Some of you, if you're watching YouTube, may have seen the episode where we talked about the vagal nerve. And this is where you can see there's a whole bunch of tendrils of this nerve around your pelvic girdle. So that's where your hip bones are. And it goes to your quadriceps and your hamstrings to get you ready to run. And then there's more branches in your gut. There's some that goes to behind over to your, when Karen talked about your shoulders rolling forward, there's a little nerve there that signals those muscles to move forward. So if you keep, even just roll your shoulders back, you'll be working with this nerve to unclench your body. So that's the number one thing that you want to do. Calm your body down. So unclench and then breathe. And we talked about you don't want to just do breathing with a clenched body because your brain won't know if you're still tight because the saber-toothed tiger is sitting on your chest. And it'll give you more adrenaline, more cortisol. So you actually have to unclench first, like 30 seconds, and then you can breathe. And then your thinking brain will kick back in again.
Because you can do that and people won't notice. So that's one thing, because my friends have done that, or my coaches have done that, and I've done that. Another thing you can do too is wiggle your toes, because that puts your attention to something else, just being more present. But I got to tell you, the exercise, the unclenching is like the number one thing I would rather you go to. You know, what did you say? 30 seconds? It's so quick. It's yeah, it's amazing to me.
Well, the reason why is because when your muscles that are around, especially see where all these tendrils come down on your quadriceps and your hamstrings, when you clench your muscles, you're actually stimulating the nerve and telling it that there's danger. So you have to send a signal that there's not danger. And up here in your back too, if you roll forwards, it's saying that there's danger. If you open up, you're saying, oh, everything's cool, I can relax. So we're sending a signal to the brain that we're not in imminent danger.
So could
And
you,
then,
if you notice that you're clenched, right? Is one way is when you notice you're clenched, you just unclench it.
yep,
Is that enough to for you to go back to the
30
to
seconds. 30
just to
seconds.
do that? Yeah.
It does not matter what the trigger is. It does not matter what the trauma is. This particular technique works across the board. What I recommend to people who find that they feel triggered all day long for what maybe they have a trauma background, maybe they have a really stressful work environment, is you should probably be scanning your body every 30 minutes and see if you've gone into an unconscious tense holding pattern and start developing an awareness, a new habit to unclench. And I've had clients like set an alarm on their clock or their watch to go off every 30 minutes. And they'll come back and say, oh my God, I'm clenched all day. This is the number one thing that you could do. And then building resilience. That's the next thing that you want to do, because that's more of a big picture strategy. And what is resilience? Resilience is defined as the capacity to bounce back.
Uh-huh.
So you have a situational stressor. What's your ability to bounce back from the stress response? And there's a whole bunch of different things. And Karen, maybe you can share some of yours, but it's just the basics: sleep, exercise, having a support circle, having good boundaries. A spiritual practice can really help you be resilient. I think this is where cultivating curiosity is part of resilience. So do you want to go a little bit into curiosity?
I found out that when you're in an event where you get triggered, right, and then you go the unclenching, because they're still in the middle of a conversation, typically when I found it, right, with the trigger with the word. So let me just put a trigger of a word, right? So what's nice about it for me is when I get a triggered response, it allows me the time to go in and wipe out any expectations I have about the conversation and go in again with just curiosity and just to go in with positive intention and explore it with what do you mean by that? Because it gives me time to recover in actuality, but it also opens up it for additional conversation about it. Because I think when you become triggered, you shut it down and the conversation, or even when you tell someone, don't say that, don't ever say that again, you're putting so much pressure on that person in that conversation. And we got to remember that conversation is supposed to be just light and enjoyment and discovering together and curiosity about. And I think when we do that, you just come out with such a better result than if you go in with a being triggered and just have to hold on to it. It's really go with curiosity. Just open your mind to just as though you have no expectations or little expectations, and just ask questions to better understand. And I think that's where I come from, as with curiosity, is to have a shared understanding first is really important.
Yeah, this is really important in the work environment because,
Definitely.
so the client base that I work with, I'm generally more working with people with post-traumatic stress. They've come from growing up in a violent home or substance abuse, things being thrown around, veterans, law enforcement, where they're really dealing with life and death situations. But curiosity in a work environment where the trigger is words or tone or a dynamic, I think curiosity, once you calm down your body, curiosity is the number one thing that you go to, because there isn't a real saber-toothed tiger there. This is about dynamics. This is about somebody's tone. So you don't have a life-threatening thing going on right then. So you have the luxury to stop, pause, and be curious. And this is one of the most effective things, not just in the work environment, your social circles, your family, anything like where there's not a bad guy shooting at you, or you're a first responder dealing with wildfires or something like that. This really should be your number one thing after
Yeah,
the body.
exactly. And I think it's the curiosity and the positive intention, right? Because oftentimes when you go into that fear, it's about you're afraid someone's going to do something, you're in defensive mode. No one wakes up, I believe, to say, oh, I'm going to make Karen's, like, make her pay today. You always laugh when I say this thing, but it's serious, because I think sometimes when we're in a meeting, oh, I knew he was going to say that. He said that to da 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 to embarrass me. But in actuality, it might be just him wanting to have a voice of something, right? Like to share
Or
something.
maybe this person is an a-hole, and
But
they're
he
trying to make.
doesn't. But it's not necessarily against you, though.
No, I'm saying even if it is,
Oh, if he is an a-hole. Okay.
that's still not a saber-toothed tiger.
Moment.
And
You're right. You're right. You're right. You're right. Right.
you could still bring that curiosity. And really, the last episode that we just did, I just did, we talked
Thank you, Christina. So I can celebrate my 60th. Yes.
as we talked in the last episode about recognizing if you're going into a suspicious mode,
Yes.
that instead of being suspicious or fearful, that if you bring curiosity, so even if the person is trying to make you look bad and you catch yourself tensing up a little bit and then you untense and you lean back and you bring curiosity and be like, I wonder what that guy thinks he's going for. You're going to be much more able to respond because you're actually not in a triggered state.
Oh, I get it. Yeah, exactly.
This is actually a pretty big topic. We're just going to be touching on it, but we wanted to start planting the seeds that if you're in a work environment, in your friend group, in your family, that if you notice you're being triggered, rather than thinking, I have to have boundaries and tell them don't do X, Y, Z, because remember, that's not a boundary because that's not 100% in your control. Like two, that's a request that's dependent upon someone else's cooperation with you. So you're pretty powerless there. And we want to help you recognize, okay, curiosity is in my control. How I think about it, relaxing my body, that's in my control. I can do that. We wanted to give you just a couple more. If you do have a more serious past history, a bank of memories that come from trauma, in order to become more empowered around triggers, that's where you want to work with a therapist to process and integrate those memories. Because remember, what the stress response is it's tapping into these intense memories and then bringing them forward as if it's happening now. Because the memories haven't been digested, they haven't been integrated. Once you can digest, talk about them, understand what it means to you in your life, your sense of self, where you're going, it will diffuse it. So to think about triggers, I always think about landmines. This is how you diffuse the landmines that may have developed over your life if you've had traumatic experiences. Okay, so the last two things, it's called exposure with response prevention, but it's basically exposing yourself over and over and over again to the situation and actively bringing all of these body relaxations and curiosity to that moment. So you have to practice this. You have to practice calming your body. You have to practice bringing curiosity, which means you have to expose yourself to the stressor. And you do it intentionally. You don't do it unconsciously or unintentionally. And then the second thing, this is called Tickner's repetition. I think I'm pronouncing this correctly. And I learned about this in something called ACT therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy. I'm going to pull up an image right now. Okay, so I'm going to take you through a quick exercise to give you an example of what this repetition thing is. If you're listening on a podcast, just listen to the description that I give you. What I have on the screen is a picture of a freshly sliced lemon. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to think in your mind of your memories of a juicy, ripe lemon. And imagine cutting that lemon and you can see that effervescence that sprays off the cut lemon and you see some of the juice running off. And then you smell the lemon and you can really smell that tangy, citrusy smell. You feel the texture. And now I want you to imagine biting into that lemon and notice the sensations that happen. So, Karen, I'm going to ask you to share, what did you notice?
I noticed that my shoulders went in. I'm like ready for the sourness of the lemon.
Right? So already, some people feel it here in their jaw, they're all ready to pucker up.
Yeah.
So this is accessing memory and how intense a memory can be.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, I could
now.
see myself. I forgot. I did actually like purse my lips. You're right. I kind of like rolled my lips in. It's
Okay, so
interesting.
now the next part, I want you to think to yourself or say to yourself, lemon, 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 lemon. Lemon, 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 lemon. Do it for like 50 times or a minute. And then, Karen, what do you notice? Am I saying lemon, 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 lemon?
No response to it.
No response. Maybe you picture a lemon, but it kind of just becomes this sound, right? Lemon, lemon,
Yeah,
lemon, lemon. It
it
almost
doesn't.
loses
I didn't
distinction.
have it. Yeah, it's let it. You lose all the like the puckering and the stress and all this other stuff because it was only neutralizing it. As I say, it's like
Yes,
neutralizing
yes,
it. Neutralizes my
yes.
response.
So this exercise is actually recommended for triggering words. So when Karen say it's feedback, you would actually go through and say feedback, 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 and you would say it 50
For a
times
minute and 30 seconds.
or like a
Right. Or 50
minute,
times. Yeah.
30 seconds or for a
Yeah.
minute. Feedback, feedback, feedback. And it takes it just becomes a blur. It disidentifies you from the word. So even if, say, you're going into performance review time and you're feeling that stress response and you just go feedback, 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 fail, 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 mistake, 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 mistake. Whatever the word is that triggers you, you can take the energy around, you can diffuse that trigger by just repeating it over and over and over again so it no longer holds that charge.
So that's why when you did the boundaries episode about the word no, or no, the pleasing episode on no, you're trying to, it was by saying no a lot, like no, no, no. This is the same thing what you're trying to do because you're neutralizing the fact that you got to get used to saying no, right?
You have to get,
So you
yeah,
don't have that
that's when
trigger
I,
response it said, right? I remember you doing that. That's part
yeah,
of
I
it.
recommended an X to have your friends like ask you ridiculous requests. Like, lend me $1,000. No.
You got to get used
uh,
to hearing it, right? To make it.
yeah. You start getting used to saying the word and over and over and over again. And the more ridiculous the request, it's almost better. I think I said, let's go get a tattoo. And you're like, yeah, let's go. Like, no, you're supposed to say no. Um, but to say no, 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 whatever the charge you have, the beliefs like, oh, if I say no, I'm mean.
Eliminate
If
it,
I say no,
neutralizes it.
it
Yeah,
neutralizes it.
yeah. Ah.
So since words is something you work with a lot in the work environment, I wanted to bring up this particular trigger diffusing exercise because if people do what you said in the beginning, which was do some journaling, identify what your trigger words might be, you can do this exercise, lemon, lemon, lemon exercise, and start to practice making those less triggering. So
Awesome. See, guys, I'm even learning new things. This is what I love about our podcast.
well, and so, folks, this was some quick hits again on how to be more effective on diffusing triggers that's within your control instead of avoidance. Give me a trigger warning so I don't listen to the thing, or relying on other people to avoid anything that could be upsetting to you. And even when we're working with veterans who have PTSD, it's still exposure. They use VR glasses and they actually have them tell them the story. So they program it into the glasses and it's almost like they're still there. It's exposing and learning to calm down your body. That is the approach to be more empowered and to build resilience. So Karen, do you have any last words of wisdom you want to share with folks?
I think it's just remember, guys, this is a journey, right? We've always talked about this, and you'll see the repetition that we have about curiosity. Check out your assumptions and the
Calm your
stories and
body.
the lizard brain. And so I think this is the whole point of there's these set of combinations that's so critical that will make your life so much lighter. The awareness is where it starts, because you have to be just aware to be able to not just slide it off or just say it's just me, but to begin to aware and attack it to your, for yourself. So this is what I want to remember. It's just, I'm still learning. It's definitely a journey, and I'm so excited. Bring in your comments and let us know how the journey's going. If you have any questions, let us take some shots to give you some more advice for a certain situation. We're here for you, and so is the rest of the community. So we'd love to hear more comments. And I look forward for you to subscribe and to like and to pass it on to a lot of your friends, because this one is something that we know that everybody deals with.
Yep. If you're human and you've had life experiences that have been hard, you probably have some triggers.
Yes.
So thank you for joining us today. We know that you have options for how you spend this time, and we really appreciate your joining us and letting us be part of your journey. So until next time, see you later, guys.
Bye, guys.